Bria Kent hadn't even finished her first coffee when the man who was about to turn her life upside down walked through the glass doors of Adler and Cole Law. He moved like he owned the world. Tall, dark suit sharp as a knife, jawline carved like a sculpture, and eyes that locked on hers the second he stepped inside. Bria blinked, her fingers frozen over the keyboard. Her job as reception wasn't exactly glamorous, signing in clients, answering phones, pretending that her life wasn't stuck in neutral. But this man, he didn't belong in her gray-toned world. He stopped in front of her desk, setting down a sleek black briefcase. "I have a 9 a.m. With Jonathan Adler, Rhys Anderson." Bria's hand twitched. She glanced down at the calendar on her screen. "Right, Mr. Anderson, he's expecting you." Her voice was steady, but her heart had kicked into overdrive. "Rhys Anderson," she repeated silently. That name was everywhere lately: business magazines, headlines, whispers in the office halls. The new CEO of Oralion Tech, billionaire, ruthless, brilliant, and right now standing 3 feet from her with the kind of presence that made the air feel too thick to breathe. She pointed toward the elevator. "Take that up to the 22nd floor. Mr. Adler's assistant will meet you there." He didn't move. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, looking at her like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. "What's your name?" Bria blinked. "Bria." "Bria Kent." "That's a good name," he said. "You're not just a receptionist, are you?" Her brows lifted. "Well, today I definitely am." His lips tugged into a faint smile, not arrogant, just observant. "You've got that look. Like you've got something to say, but don't say it." Before she could respond, the elevator dinged, and a young woman in heels stepped out, waving him over. "Mr. Anderson, we're ready for you." He gave Bria one last look. "Nice to meet you, Bria," she exhaled when he finally stepped away. That should have been it. Another rich client blowing through, barely remembering the person at the front desk. Except it wasn't, because the next morning he was back, and the morning after that, and the one after that, always early. Always dressed like he had a boardroom waiting. But he never went up immediately. He lingered, talked to her. Asked about her music taste, her favorite breakfast spot, what book she was reading. Nothing flirty, just curious, attentive, like he actually wanted to know her. By the end of the week, Bria had started watching the front door like a teenager waiting for her crush to walk into homeroom. On Friday, she was filing intake forms when he appeared again, holding 2 coffees. "I guessed on the milk," he said, setting one on her desk. "Do you take sugar?" She stared at him. "You brought me coffee." "Well, you usually have your own by now, but it looked like you didn't get a chance today." "How do you know that?" He grinned. "Bria, I notice things." The warmth in her chest was immediate and annoying. "You're aware this is wildly inappropriate, right?" she said, picking up the cup anyway. "You're not married," he said simply. She flushed. "Still, you're a client. For now." His tone was casual, but his eyes didn't move from hers. She took a sip. It was perfect. He leaned on the counter. "Let me take you to dinner." Her heart stopped. "You're kidding." "I'm not. You're Rhys Anderson, the Rhys Anderson. You probably eat in places that don't even have menus. So I'll pick somewhere with menus and we'll eat." She stared at him. "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because you're the first person I've met in a long time who doesn't treat me like a business deal. Because you actually laugh when something's funny. And because I think you'd tell me the truth, even if I didn't like it." Her stomach flipped. She wanted to say no. She should have said no. But instead she nodded. "Fine, one dinner." He pushed away from the counter, smiling. "I'll send a car tomorrow, 7, she laughed. "Of course you have a car to send," he winked. "You'll like it." The next evening, Bria stepped out of her apartment in a navy dress she hadn't worn since her cousin's wedding and nearly stumbled when she saw the sleek black car waiting, engine humming. The driver opened the door and she slid inside, expecting to see Rhys already there. But the car was empty, except for a small white box on the seat. Inside was a note. "Just in case you didn't have time to grab one. She lifted the lid and gasped. A pair of silver heels, elegant, expensive, and exactly her size. She clutched the box to her chest, heart racing. Dinner was at her rooftop restaurant overlooking the city skyline. Rhys was already waiting, tall and devastating in a dark suit with no tie, sleeves rolled up like he didn't care about looking perfect because he already was. "You look," he said slowly, staring at her. "Wow," Bria blushed. "Thanks for the shoes." You're welcome, now sit, eat, tell me everything. And somehow she did. They talked through appetizers, entrees, dessert. About her dream to work in publishing, about his childhood in Chicago, about the pressure of running a $1 billion company when everyone expected you to fail or worse, to succeed too much. He didn't talk like a CEO. He talked like a man who'd seen too much too fast and was tired of pretending he didn't care. By the time dessert came, Bria had forgotten every rule she told herself about not getting involved with clients, not falling for rich men, not letting someone under her skin. Because Rhys wasn't just rich, he was real, and looking at her like she was the only real thing in the room, she sipped her wine, trying to keep her voice light. You do this with all the receptionists, only the ones who make me want to cancel meetings just to see them smile, she laughed. That's a terrible business strategy. He leaned in closer. Maybe, but it's working. And just like that, Bria Kent's very normal life stopped being normal at all. Bria stood at the back of the elevator Monday morning, trying to ignore the ridiculous flutter in her chest. She hadn't seen Rhys since their dinner Saturday night. He hadn't come by the office Sunday, not that she expected him to, and he hadn't called. But there'd been no awkward silence either, just space. And now, with every floor that ticked upward, she found herself rehearsing what she'd say if he walked through the door again. When she reached the front desk, she barely had time to set down her bag before the office phone rang. She answered automatically, launching into the firm's standard greeting, but the voice on the other end cut straight through it. Don't cancel your lunch break today. Bria's pulse stumbled. Excuse me, I'm sending a car, noon sharp. Wear something comfortable. She opened her mouth, but the line had already gone dead. She hung up slowly, blinking at the handset like it might give her answers. Comfortable? Noon. Had he seriously just noon arrived with a sleek black car pulling up to the curb like it had been summoned by magic? The driver didn't blink when she stepped out in her navy slacks and sweater. He opened the door and gestured her inside. 15 minutes later, she was standing in the middle of a glass-walled art gallery overlooking the river, the space completely empty except for Rhys. His jacket was gone, sleeves pushed up again, but there was something different in his face today. Not tired, not guarded, just focused. You brought me to a gallery, she asked, glancing around at the massive canvases and sculptures scattered across the polished floors. You mentioned once you used to sketch, he said. Thought you might like this. Her eyes narrowed. When did I mention that? You were talking about how you spent your first year in the city, something about sketching strangers on the subway until it got too awkward. She hadn't even remembered saying that. She stared at him. You really pay attention, don't you? I don't waste time asking questions I don't care about. She looked around again, slower this time. The gallery wasn't just curated, it was personal. Some of the pieces were contemporary, others abstract, and one an enormous charcoal drawing of a dancer mid-motion made her breath catch. That one's yours, he said quietly. She turned. What? I bought it last year. The artist sold prints, but I tracked down the original. Her heart thudded. Why? Because it felt like something I wasn't supposed to forget. She swallowed, suddenly unsure how to respond. He glanced at his watch. We've got 40 minutes before I'm due in Midtown. Want to walk? They stepped outside, the wind off the river tugging at her sleeves as they strolled the footpath. Rhys stayed close, but he didn't touch her. He didn't need to. Do you ever wish you'd done something else? She asked, breaking the silence. He looked over at her. All the time. But I never had the chance. Why not? My father died when I was 16. Everything he left behind was falling apart. I didn't get to pick my future. I just tried to hold onto what was left of his. She hadn't expected that. She glanced at him, unsure what to say. He gave a brief nod like he'd already moved past it. What about you? Why the law firm? It was supposed to be temporary. I had an internship lined up with a publishing house after college, but they shut down the month I graduated. Rent doesn't wait. He looked at her. You still want to publish? She smiled faintly. Doesn't pay much and the hours are brutal, but yeah, I do. He stopped walking. She turned to face him and his eyes were unreadable. Bria, he said slowly, I don't want to play games with you. Her throat tightened. I don't want games either. I'm not good at casual, I don't have the time for it, and I'm not interested in pretending I don't care when I do, she nodded, pulse racing. So if this is just fun for you, tell me now, I'll respect it. But if you're scared because it's real, I need you to say that instead. Something shifted in the air between them. The wind, the river, the quiet hum of the city behind them, it all faded. I'm scared because it's real, she said finally, his jaw clenched. Then we're on the same page. A black SUV pulled up near the curb. Rhys glanced toward it, then back at her. I have to go, but I'll see you tonight. Tonight, his eyes didn't leave hers. 7, dress warm, she watched him go, the SUV swallowing him up before she could ask another question. That evening, she stepped out of her apartment in a long wool coat, unsure what to expect. Another car was waiting, but this one wasn't black. It was midnight blue, sleek and soft-edged, like it belonged in a film. The driver nodded without a word and opened the door. They drove north. Past the city limits, past the traffic, past anything familiar. When they pulled off the main road, Bria saw lights in the trees, tiny golden strands wrapped around trunks hanging from branches. The car stopped in front of a stone path that led into a clearing. She stepped out slowly. There, in the middle of a quiet, snow-dusted woodland, stood a glass greenhouse glowing with light. Rhys stood at the entrance, one hand in his coat pocket. Inside, a table for two was set beneath hanging lanterns, soft music playing from somewhere unseen. "You did this?" she asked, walking toward him. "I wanted something quiet, somewhere I could actually hear you." She stepped inside, breath fogging the air, and let him take her coat. They ate beneath the stars, surrounded by warmth and glass and the scent of jasmine from potted vines lining the walls. Halfway through the meal, she looked up at him. "Why me?" He leaned back, eyes steady. "Because you see people, not just what they show. You ask questions no one else bothers to ask, and when you look at me, I don't feel like I have to earn your approval." She swallowed. "You don't." He reached across the table, brushing her fingers. "I've spent my life building walls. I didn't think anyone could see past them. And now I'm hoping you don't stop looking." It wasn't a declaration, it wasn't a promise, but it was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to her, and suddenly Bria Kent wasn't just falling, she was already gone. The first time Bria walked into Rhys's penthouse, she realized she'd never really understood what wealth looked like, not like this. The elevator opened straight into his living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the entire wall, revealing a skyline that looked too perfect to be real. The furniture was minimalist but impossibly soft-looking, the kind of pieces chosen by someone who didn't need to ask for price tags. A fireplace flickered beneath a steel-framed mantel, and a grand piano sat near the windows, untouched but polished to a mirror sheen. Rhys took her coat in silence. She followed him in, trying not to gape, but he noticed anyway. "I don't spend much time here," he said, setting down her bag on a low table. "It always feels more like a showroom than a home." "Then why live here?" Bria asked, turning toward him. "I needed somewhere central when I took over the company. This was available. That was the only thought I gave it." She crossed to the window, her reflection ghosted over the glittering skyline. "It's beautiful, but it feels cold." "Exactly." He came to stand beside her, his shoulder just brushing hers. She didn't lean into it, but she didn't move away either. "This place looks like no one's ever spilled a drink here, tripped on a rug, or fallen asleep on the couch mid-movie," she said. "Because they haven't," she turned her head. "Not even you." His expression shifted, something unreadable flickering across it. "I don't fall asleep easily." She didn't ask why, not yet. Instead, she glanced behind him. "Is that your piano?" "I used to play," he said. "Stopped a few years ago." "Why?" He hesitated. "I had a brother, he played better than I ever could. After he died, I couldn't touch it again." Bria didn't speak. The silence stretched between them, not awkward, just heavy. Rhys looked down at his shoes, jaw tight. He was 23. "Motorcycle accident. I spent years trying to pull him out of trouble, and the one time I wasn't there." "You don't have to explain," she said gently. "I do," he replied, "because you're the first person I've let in past the front doors." She looked up at him. "That's not nothing." He shook his head slightly. "It's everything." They spent the rest of the evening in his kitchen, eating takeout from paper boxes over a marble island that looked like it had never seen grease or steam. Rhys poured wine into stemless glasses, and the conversation shifted lighter now, easier. "Do you ever think about starting over?" Bria asked, pushing a piece of tofu around with her fork. "I tried once," he said. "After college, I took a year off, traveled. Thought I could escape the shadow of my father's legacy. And I came back, found it waiting." She tilted her head. "Do you think you're still living in that shadow?" He met her eyes. "No. I think I became the shadow." She didn't know what to say to that, so she reached across the counter and took his hand. The next morning, she woke tangled in his sheets, sunlight painting the room in pale gold. The city buzzed below, but up here, it felt 1,000 miles away. Rhys was already up, standing near the window in nothing but dark slacks, a mug in one hand. When she stirred, he turned. "Coffee's on," he said quietly. She wrapped the blanket around her and joined him, accepting the mug he offered. They stood in silence for a while, neither of them needing to fill it. Then he spoke. "I've been thinking about making changes, selling the penthouse, moving the company headquarters." Bria blinked. "Why?" "Because I've spent years building things I thought I needed. But none of it means anything if I can't share it with someone who sees me." She tightened her grip on the mug. "I haven't felt like myself in a long time," he said. "But with you, I do." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she set the mug down and turned to face him fully. "I want to believe you," she said. "But this is moving fast, too fast." He nodded. "I know, but I don't want to pretend I'm not all in." She exhaled sharply, unsure what to do with the weight of that. Later that day, back at the office, Bria tried to focus, but her mind kept drifting. She was filing case summaries when Jonathan Adler himself appeared at her desk. "Miss Kent," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Mr. Anderson has requested you be transferred to his team for some temporary administrative support, effective immediately." She froze. "I'm sorry, what?" "You'll be working directly with his legal liaison. Internal affairs and compliance filings. I assume he's informed you." He hadn't. Not a word. Yes, of course," she lied. Adler nodded, already halfway back to his office. The moment he disappeared, Bria grabbed her purse and stormed toward the elevators. The ride to the top floor felt endless, her pulse pounding with every tick upward. When she stepped into the executive wing, Rhys was alone in the glass-walled conference room, reviewing a document. He looked up as soon as she entered. "You requested I be transferred to your team," she demanded. "I did," he said calmly, "because I trust you. You didn't even ask me." "I didn't think I needed to." Her voice hardened. "I'm not one of your board members, Rhys. You don't get to make decisions about my life without asking." He stood, pacing toward her. "I wanted you closer. This way we can see each other without sneaking around. You won't have to hide. I thought it would make things easier." "For who?" she shot back. "You. So you can keep tabs on me without leaving your ivory tower." He flinched. "I don't want to be another convenience in your perfectly curated world," she said, stepping back. "You're not." "Then prove it." He stared at her, jaw locked. "How?" "Start treating me like your equal. Not your experiment." Bria turned before he could answer, pushing through the doors, her hands shaking. She didn't see the way he sagged against the glass once she was gone. That night there was no text, no call, no car waiting, just silence. And for the first time since Rhys Anderson had walked into her life, Bria Kent wasn't sure she wanted to open the door again if he knocked. Bria stared at the blank ceiling of her apartment that night, sleep a distant notion. Her phone lay silent on the pillow beside her. Not that she expected it to light up, but part of her, an infuriating, hopeful part, kept glancing at it anyway. She'd drawn a line. One he hadn't crossed, and maybe that was for the best. Maybe. The next morning, she arrived at work early, hoping the quiet would help her think. The front desk was just waking up, phones quiet, lights still flickering on floor by floor. She slipped behind the counter, logged in, and tried to focus. 10 minutes later, her supervisor approached with careful steps. "Bria," she said. "There's someone waiting for you in the conference room on 15. She frowned. "There's no meeting scheduled." He said it was personal. The elevator hummed as it climbed. Bria folded her arms, bracing herself. When the doors opened, the hallway was empty except for the soft amber light spilling from the corner conference room. She stepped inside and stopped. The long table had been cleared. In its place stood a single easel holding a framed sketch. Her sketch. The one she'd drawn 3 years ago on a park bench during a thunderstorm. A woman with rain in her hair and fire in her eyes. She hadn't shown it to anyone. She'd sold it, anonymously, to pay rent, and now it was here. Rhys stood beside it, his hands in the pockets of a charcoal coat. It took me a long time to find the original. Bria remained at the doorway. Why? Because it reminded me of you before I even knew your name. She looked at the drawing, heart pounding. I didn't come here to fix everything with a frame and a memory, he continued. I know I overstepped. I made decisions without asking you. I acted like I could solve things by moving pieces around. That's not love, that's control, and I'm done doing that. Her voice was low. You think this is enough? No. But I think it's a start. She walked slowly into the room, stopping just a few feet from him. You don't get to rearrange my life to make yours easier. I wasn't trying to make it easier, he said. I was trying to keep it close. Bria shook her head. You don't need to protect me. I'm not a liability. I've built my life with both hands and I don't want to be someone's side story. You're not, he said, stepping forward. You're the whole damn plot. Her breath caught. I've spent my entire life chasing things that looked like success, he said, voice rough. But it always felt like I was running from something. You made me stop. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. She crossed her arms. And what happens when things get hard, when I don't agree with you, when I say no? Then we figure it out, he said, together. Without buying solutions, without boardroom tactics, just you and me. Bria studied his face. The man who had once walked into her lobby like he owned the world now stood still, uncertain, waiting. I wanted something real, she said softly. And for a minute I thought maybe you did too. I do, he said. I just didn't know how to hold it without breaking it. She hesitated, then reached out and touched his wrist. Then stop trying to hold it, just be in it. His shoulders eased. Come with me? Where? He smiled, not the charming, calculated one she'd seen him wear in meetings, but something quieter, somewhere that doesn't feel like glass walls and cold light. She didn't ask questions, she just followed. They left the building through a side entrance, avoiding the watchful eyes of employees and security. Outside, a vintage convertible waited on the curb, top down despite the chill. Rhys opened the door for her. They drove north again, past the skyline, past the exits she recognized, until the roads narrowed and the trees thickened. Eventually, they pulled into a small clearing. A single cottage sat at the edge of a frozen lake, smoke curling from the chimney. Bria stepped out slowly. What is this place? My brother and I built it one summer. It was supposed to be a retreat, a place to breathe. She turned toward him. You never told me about this. I wasn't ready, he said, but I am now. Inside, the space was simple and warm wood beams, soft rugs, a fire already lit. She sank into the couch while Rhys dropped logs into the flames. I've been selling things, he said. Properties, investments, anything that doesn't serve me anymore. Bria looked at him. You don't need to prove anything. I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for me. For the life I want to build. She stood and walked toward him. And what does that life look like? He turned, facing her fully. You, a home that feels like one, days that don't start with a balance sheet, nights that end with your voice in the dark. Bria reached up and touched his face. That sounds like the life I want too. He exhaled, like something inside him had finally released. They stayed in the cottage for 2 days. No phones, no meetings, just long walks on frozen trails and slow mornings with coffee and silence. On the final evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Rhys pulled something from his coat pocket. It wasn't a ring, it was a key. This is yours, he said. If you want it, no pressure. She turned it over in her hand. What does it open? The door to the only place I've ever wanted to be. She looked up at him. You're not asking for forever, I'm asking for today, and every day you want after that. Bria smiled, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. Then yes. He kissed her, slow and certain, and in that moment, every wall he'd ever built crumbled. 3 months later, Bria stood beside Rhys beneath a canopy of light strung between trees. Their wedding was small, just close friends, laughter, and the sound of wind in the leaves. As they danced to soft music under the stars, he leaned close. "I still remember the first time I saw you," he whispered. "I walked into that lobby and forgot what I came for." Bria laughed. "And now I remember exactly what I found." She rested her head on his shoulder, heart full. Not a single part of this had been part of her plan, but it was the only life she ever wanted, and this time it was hers too. Bria pressed her palm against the cool glass of the cottage window, watching as early spring light filtered through the trees. The lake remained frozen in patches, but the snow had receded into the shadows, and a few stubborn crocuses were beginning to push through the soil near the porch. Rhys stood behind her, looping a soft scarf around her neck as if she might slip away with the wind. "Do you realize," she said without turning, "this is the first morning in years I haven't had a single email waiting." Rhys wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "That's because I told your former supervisor you were no longer available for anything resembling a normal job," she smiled. "You didn't. I did, and I hired someone else to fill the role. She's already terrified of me, which means she'll do great." Bria leaned into him, letting the warmth of his body settle the last of her nerves. "You know I'm not going to sit here and let you play the night in a tailored suit while I sip tea and stare out windows, right? I would never insult you like that," he said. "You're not the kind of woman who waits for life to happen. That's why I built you an office." She turned. "You what?" He stepped back, took her hand, and led her down the hallway to a room she hadn't yet explored. When he opened the door, sunlight spilled across a space lined with bookshelves, a wide writing desk, and a wall of pinboards hung with blank pages waiting to be filled. "I called in a favor from a friend who designs interiors for publishing houses," he said. "You told me your dream was to edit stories, so I figured you needed a place to start." Bria stepped inside slowly, her hand trailing the edge of the desk. "You remembered the name of the imprint I wanted to work for. It's on that shelf." "I don't forget the things that matter." She turned toward him, eyes wide. "I've never had anyone do something this thoughtful for me." "I've never wanted to," he said. Later that week, they traveled back to the city together. Rhys had meetings that couldn't be pushed any further, and Bria had her first interview with a boutique literary agency that specialized in debut authors. The moment she stepped into the sunlit office on Madison Avenue, she knew she didn't want to leave. The interview wasn't about resumes. The founder, a sharp-eyed editor in her 60s, wanted to talk about voice, about instinct, about Bria's gut reactions to manuscripts. They spent nearly 2 hours discussing the kinds of stories that deserved to be told. When Bria left, her heart was pounding not with nerves, but with clarity. By the time she got back to Rhys's car, she didn't even wait for him to ask. "I want to work there," she blurted. "They get it." "I don't care what the salary is, I just want to be in the room." He reached for her hand. "Then that's where you'll be." That night, Rhys hosted a dinner for his closest advisors. Not a boardroom affair, just a quiet, private celebration at a restored brownstone he'd purchased for exactly this kind of evening. Bria wore a deep emerald dress he hadn't seen before, and when she stepped into the dining room, every conversation paused. He crossed the room in 5 strides. "You look like I had to earn the right to stand beside you." "You did," she said, linking her arm through his. During dinner, one of his advisors, a woman with sharp red nails and sharper instincts, leaned toward Bria. "I've never seen him like this," she said under her breath. "He's always been about numbers, outcomes, leverage, but tonight he looks like a man who finally started living." Bria met Rhys's eyes across the table. He was laughing genuinely, without calculation, and in that moment, every piece of her clicked into place. By spring's end, they sold the penthouse. The proceeds went into a foundation Rhys established in his brother's name, funding scholarships for young musicians from underserved neighborhoods. He never made a press release, never held a fundraiser. It wasn't about image anymore. Bria took the job at the agency. She started as a reader, then quickly became an assistant editor. Her instincts turned out to be more valuable than any degree, and within 6 months, she had her first acquisition, a debut novel about a woman who rebuilt her life after walking away from everything she thought she wanted. They held the launch party in the same gallery where Rhys had taken her that first strange, magical afternoon. The artist who had created the dancer sketch arrived unannounced, and when he saw it displayed behind Bria's signing table, he pulled her aside. "You're the woman I drew," he said in awe. Bria smiled. "I know." After the guests left and the lights dimmed, Rhys took her hand and pulled her onto the gallery floor. "No music?" she asked, resting her hands on his shoulders. "We don't need it," he said. "I remember the rhythm of your laugh." They danced slowly, the city flickering beyond the glass, and when they returned to the cottage that night, the stars brighter than she'd ever seen them, Bria sat at her desk and started writing her own story, not fiction, not memoir. Something in between. A story about a woman who thought she was invisible until a man with too much power and not enough peace saw her in full color. They married again the following year. This time with more people, more laughter, and a lot more dancing. Her mother cried when she saw the ceremony location, an open field behind the cottage, strung with hundreds of lanterns Rhys had hung himself. Her father walked her down a wildflower-lined aisle, whispering, "You found the one who makes you shine." Rhys didn't write vows, he spoke from the heart. "I spent years building walls taller than anyone could climb. You didn't try to scale them. You just stood at the base and waited until I came down, and I did, for you." Bria couldn't speak at first. Then she leaned into him and said, "You gave me space to become who I already was. That's the only kind of love I've ever wanted." They kissed to the sound of cheers, of wind through pine trees and the softest music drifting from a string quartet tucked beneath an oak tree. Years passed. Bria published her first novel. Rhys stepped back from day-to-day operations and started mentoring young entrepreneurs who didn't come from privilege. They traveled often, sometimes to big cities, sometimes to quiet mountain towns, but they always returned to the cottage. One evening, long after the sun had set and the fire was low, Bria leaned against Rhys's chest on the couch. "Do you think we'll ever get tired of this?" she asked. He kissed the top of her head. "Only if you stop laughing in your sleep." "I do not." "You do," he said. "And it's my favorite sound in the world." She laughed then, just to prove him right. And as the fire crackled, the lake shimmered in moonlight, and the trees outside whispered secrets only they could understand, Bria knew she'd never have to search for happiness again. She'd already found it. In him, in herself. In the life they'd built together, honest, imperfect, and absolutely, breathtakingly real.